Welcome back. You're watching Your World at 10. Now, as the drought situation worsens across the country, food prices continue to spiral, part unnoticed because of the benign wholesale price index number. To discuss the impact of this drought on food prices and how we can potentially mitigate the inflationary impact of this drought, we're joined by S. Sivakumar. He's the CEO of ITC's Agribusiness Division, and P.H. Ravikumar, former Managing Director of the NCDEX. Both are veterans in the agricultural commodity space. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on Your World at 10. I'll start with you, Mr. Sivakumar. Can you give us a sense, because you are sort of intimately involved with the agricultural business of ITC, on how bad things look on ground?
No, certainly I think, as has been now the topic over the last several weeks now, something like 250 districts out of 600 are impacted by this round of delayed monsoon and lower rainfall and all of that. But I think interestingly, over the last week or so, there is some recovery in some of the most badly affected places like Western UP, even Eastern UP, some parts of Punjab and Haryana, little bits of Andhra Pradesh and Maharashtra. I think there is some coverage now that we are seeing in these parts which are very badly affected. And so there is a better sense that now farmers have that not all is lost and there's some salvage which is happening.
Mr. Ravikumar, would you like to add your perspective to that?
Yes, if you look at the consumer price index for agricultural laborers is in the double-digit range. Consumer price index for the industrial workers is also in the double-digit range. And if you look at the wholesale price index composition, if you take the food items, it's again in the double-digit range. Because of the area of cultivation being same or slightly lower, and the delayed monsoon, delayed sowing, rice production probably would be lower by about 10%. And more importantly, the pulses production, notwithstanding statements which have come from Ministry of Agriculture, are expected to be slightly lower than last year. Last year itself was lower than the year preceding. But more important is Kharif, the rain and the water which is used retains, the moisture is retained in the soil, and that is what takes the Rabi crops ahead. So one also needs to look at the impact on Rabi crops because of delayed monsoon or poor monsoon, particularly, as Shiv just now said, a large number of districts have been declared as drought prone. The production of Rabi in these areas, particularly wheat, needs to be gauged. And I would say that this is not the first time that, given the change in the demographic profile of the people in India, youth is now almost 50% of the population, the eating habits have changed. There is a dire need for a perspective plan on approach to agriculture and separating those which can be dealt with from those which can't be dealt with in the next 3 to 5 years time frame.
All right, let me focus on the shorter-term mitigation opportunities, Mr. Ravikumar. We had the agricultural minister who has apparently told states to start focusing on compensating the production loss during the Kharif season in the Rabi season. Now, is that a possibility, is my first question to you. And my second question is, what else can the government do in the shorter term to be able to meet, some of the shortages? Like, for instance, they're already considering a proposal to waive the import duty on rice. There's talk of, augmenting sugar supply, a little bit of talk on the wheat front. So which areas or which crops do they need to focus on, or food grains do they need to focus on, and what can they do in the short term?
Short run, the compensating the farmers for loss of production is definitely a short-term measure. It can't be a repetitive permanent measure. It can be a one-time measure at best. Already you are looking at the government borrowing and the expected impact on interest rates, and in addition, if there is a money supply without production, that would add to the inflationary pressures and upward pressure on the interest rates. Therefore, short-term imports are the only solution, unless you have some areas which have a reasonable amount of water and you are able to persuade farmers to migrate from their traditional crops into some of the essential commodities, which is not feasible. Let's accept that's not feasible today. Imports, therefore, are the only issue. And while for the Kharif crops, I don't see an immediate solution. For the Rabi crops, there is sufficient time to plan. Wheat can be bought in the international markets. The prices have still not moved because India's production of wheat for next season is not known. We are already in the month of middle of August, and normally the wheat sowing will take place in October. time for the government to plan for wheat in particular.
All right, Mr. Sivakumar, could you add to that in terms of what we can do in the shorter term? And if imports is our only option, then what is that going to mean for food grain prices for consumers?
No, I think certainly besides imports where things like pulses and edible oils are concerned and possibly sugar, but I think basic staples like rice and wheat already we have sufficient stocks. Symbolically stepping up release of those things, whether it is under NREGA or otherwise into the public distribution system as well as open market sales, already starting some of those releases will certainly have a good effect. But I think besides those aspects and imports as well as releasing, one more thing which is still possible is now with some of the more recent rains, it is still possible to go for some of the late sown pulses, some of the late sown oil seeds like sunflower. So government support to these things in terms of an additional diesel subsidy to farmers so that they can pump up a little bit of water, or making available some of these seeds where they exist with some of the government corporations. I think that can still salvage a late Kharif crop even much before we see Rabi crops. So that can step up production a little bit as well as put a little more money into the hands of the farmers.
All right. Even if all these scenarios are dealt with by the government, both in terms of maybe open market sales, distribution via the public distribution system, opening up the gates to imports of some of these commodities. Mr. Sivakumar, what's the worst case situation likely to be in the course of the next 6 months? We go into festival season. India's consumption is the highest then, and I'm sure higher prices will really pinch at that point in time. So what's the worst case situation we can build over the next 6 months, assuming that whatever recovery we're to have in the rainfall has already happened?
I think particularly sugar and pulses are two areas. One is seeing price jumps that will probably be things that we must worry about. Not so much for rice and wheat because of the existing stock that is already available, although paddy is something which is the worst affected in the Kharif in terms of total sowings and productivity also eventually. But I think the concern is not so much on those fronts, but concern is more on sugar and pulses, and to some degree on possibly vegetables as they get lower and lower water as we go along, that we need to grow those crops. I think in those crops is what we really need to worry about in terms of what's the level of price increase that will happen. Because in these crops, particularly sugarcane and pulses, it is not just the shortage of this year rainfall that is impacting, but it is more a carry forward of shortage that we have seen in the previous rounds also. Unlike in case of paddy and wheat, where we just had record crops after 5 good monsoons. So that's a comfortable situation.
So no matter what we do, Mr. Sivakumar, prices are likely to increase 10 to 20% from here onwards in the next 3 or 4 months?
No, I think, as I said, if early releases of some of these stocks symbolically will have an impact, and import announcement being done fairly quickly can also have a salutary impact. From here, another 20% is not necessary if some of these measures are already taken now. It can still be contained because a lot of these is already discounted in the prices as they moved in the last 4 weeks or so. So consequently, it is still possible to keep it under 10% rise from the current levels.
Mr. Ravikumar, would you agree with that? Do we have sufficient stock in some of these commodities to be able to meet the demand gap through open market sales or through the public distribution system? And if yes, what is the likely impact on prices in the coming next 3 to 4 months?
The worst case scenario, I mean, the question you asked, I would say Tur touching 100 rupees.
Wow.
I mean, something which never seen before. Sugar touching 35. Again, I don't think seen in the last 10, 12 years. This can be mitigated exactly as Shiv said, that we have certain stocks now. We can source certain stocks. For example, some of the pulses can come from our neighboring country, Myanmar, with whom we are one of the 2 countries who still deal with Burma, Myanmar. And management of existing stocks prudently. The current approach to management of stocks has to drastically change. But I am not seeing any steps taken to prudently and scientifically manage existing stocks, and therefore maybe I am sounding a little cynical. I do see upward pressure in prices persisting in the next 3-4 months. But clearly this can be done for Rabi crops. Time is still thereabout. We can source some of the Rabi crops from external sources. But we can't continue with these short-term measures. You need definitive long-term measures. And if you look at agriculture as a sphere, the acceptance of agriculture as a business at policy level has not come about. Unless agriculture is treated as a business and enabled in the policy structures, you will not have more investments, new methods, technology will not come, and production will continue to stagnate as at present.
You've touched a nerve and the core nerve in this discussion, Mr. Ravi Kumar, but I won't get into that. That's a longer-term debate that this country needs to have. All right, gentlemen, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for weighing in on your thoughts on how we're likely to fight this drought and what impact it's going to have on food prices. Mr. Ravi Kumar, Mr. Sivakumar, thank you very much for your time and perspective on your world.